Welcome to the Hump Day Hangout podcast by Semantic Mastery, where we answer your local SEO questions every week at 4 p.m. Eastern. I'm Adam Moody, and my partner at Semantic Mastery, Bradley Benner, will be sharing his decades of expertise based on not only helping others, but running his own agencies and businesses in the space. If you'd like to join us live on YouTube each week, just go to www.semanticmastery.com/HDHO at 4 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. If you'd like to ask a question ahead of time, go to the same link, www.semanticmastery.com/HDHO at any time and submit it there. Don't forget, you can get the Semantic Mastery Local SEO Toolkit for free at the same URL. Okay, let's get going with this episode. Welcome everybody to Hump Day Hangouts. This is episode number 550. Today is the 11th of June, 2025, and we've got a couple of quick announcements before we get into your local SEO questions. And we're going to check in with everybody real quick, and I'll pick on Chris first since he's just hopping on. Chris, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Crazy working in the lab as usual. Yeah, that's my life at the moment. Exciting times.
Yep, fair enough. Bradley, how about you? I know you're in the background taking care of some tech stuff, but how are you doing?
I'm good, man. Busy as all hell, making progress. Um, Starting to get caught up a little bit after moving into my new home and being locked out of accounts and all that stuff for a bit. So it's kind of good to be getting caught back up. I'm not there yet, but trying to get caught up and making progress, which is a good thing. And making progress on the SOP stuff for DHA phase 2, which is good because we hope to be launching that sometime during the next phase 1 group. So a
Nice.
lot of good
Well,
stuff coming.
yeah, while we're on the topic, we've been sharing some videos, about what people see with the agency, the common problems. We've all been there. And, part of DHA training is getting people out of that rut, right? The feast or famine, where you're working, oh, great, I've got customers coming in, I'm getting clients, but now I've got to fulfill. And, a lot of that, what your training provides in DHA is getting out of that and automating a lot of this work so you can grow an agency. So I think now would be the time, since we have people joining us new every week. Can you go over a little bit about what DHA is as far as who it might be for and, just the background on it in a minute or two so people can get up to speed?
Yeah, so Directory Hybrid Agency, the DHA program, that's what stands for Directory Hybrid Agency. That is kind of the process that I've been using and developing for my own agency over the last over 4 years now, really going on 5 years, really. And it starts using selecting a particular industry, developing a brand, which could be a DBA, a doing business as, so a fictitious name of whatever your main corporation is, but a brand specific name or a name that would be specific, a brand name specific to the industry that would be relevant to whatever industry it is that you select. And there's training for selecting an industry and all that kind of stuff. And then building a directory, and you use the directory as kind of your outreach process, like because you just contact clients or potential customers, right? So business owners within a with whatever your chosen industry is, you do cold email contact to them to just request that they confirm their company's contact information for their free directory listing on your directory, whatever the title of that is, if that makes sense. And the whole point is to get them to reply, to either confirm the information that you put in the email, which I intentionally leave the website field blank. So it says name, address, phone number, service area, and website address. But then I leave the website address blank in the email outreach because I want them to reply back and say, yes, that information is correct, but my website's missing, right? Or no, the phone number needs to be updated and also my website's missing, something like that. The whole reason we leave that out intentionally because we want to elicit a response. And what happens is we get a reply back from cold email when we do the cold email outreach saying, hey, we're trying to confirm your contact information for your free directory listing on the treecarehq.com directory, something like that. They reply back. They either have updated the information or confirmed that it's accurate or whatever. And once we get a reply back, now we know we've got direct communication with, in my industry, it's almost always the business owner. In other industries, it might be an executive or a receptionist or something like that. But now you have direct communication with somebody within that company. And so then from that point forward, there's the process of optimizing the listing. Once they reply, that's basically the green light for then publishing a listing on the directory. So we then have there's training for the VAs or VA or somebody within your team to then go publish the listing, and identify the areas that the company that you are publishing the listing for has deficiencies or problems in their online presence. The virtual assistant or your team member who is responsible for publishing the listing should be able to identify those problems and then mark those in the contact record in the CRM, which we use high level for our CRM. And then after the listing is ready, then there's a listing delivery sequence. It's a set of automations that then kind of get the client to book a call, or the customer, the prospect, to book a call to then review the listing on the call. And that is the start of the sales conversation. So the listing delivery appointment is the start of the sales conversation. And I always kind of jump in with like a sales call is always about, like, I tell them at the start of the call that we're going to cover two things. Like, hey, thanks for scheduling this call. We're going to cover two things on this call. The first thing we're going to do is review your directory listing, make sure that it's accurate, that you're happy with it. We'll make any changes or edits in real time, like while we're on the call, make sure that it's happy before we can, start to promote it, essentially. And then number two, we found some areas or issues that are preventing you from getting jobs within the areas that you told us you wanted to get jobs from. At least as far as your online presence goes. And we'd like to introduce you to, show you those problems and introduce you to some low cost options that will help to start to resolve some of those problems so that you get more jobs from people that are online. Does that make sense? Should we continue to continue our call? And I nod my head and I ask them, like, I'm asking, it's a leading question. I want them to say yes. And I've never had any one of them say, no, I'm not interested. Let's end this call. They all say, yeah, that's great. Let's go. Something like that. So then we go into the call and we, basically review the listing, and then I go into and introduce to them the problems that were identified through the process of optimizing the directory listing. And we have visual aids that help us to kind of agitate the problem. Remember, we're using the problem agitate solution copywriting framework. This whole process is built around that. And so when we get on the call, we introduce the problem, we agitate it by then showing them with visual representations, visual aids essentially, of how they have really a terrible online presence, or one that could be improved. It might not be terrible, but almost always it could be improved. And so in any case, we can show them that while we're on the call, and then that's when we can start to introduce our offers to them. And we have a series of front-end low-cost offers that we typically lead with. If a prospect is ready, willing, and able to jump right into a higher retainer level package, by all means, you can pitch it to them and sell it to them. But most of the time, a lot of companies, local businesses, have been burned by marketing agencies and SEOs in the past. So I like to use low cost offers that I can get them engaged with me on a very low cost offer, something that they don't even really think about or blink when I tell them what the price is, because it's very inexpensive. And that way I can start to provide services to them and develop a relationship with them, so that then I can ascend them to additional services where they layer on additional services, or kind of graduate up to a higher level retainer package that would be, more of a full suite of services, et cetera. And so it's a very, very good service, or kind of process, I should say, for landing new clients, because it's non-confrontational, it's non-salesy. We don't even introduce any offers until we've had multiple communications with the contact. And then we get on a call and give them something of value before we ever even present any sort of offer to them whatsoever. And so it's a great way to kind of warm up and overcome the objections that you get from cold calls and cold emails. And anytime a local business thinks that a marketer has solicited them, they put up their defenses. I mean, it's very difficult to break through. I found this way consistently breaks through and initiates a conversation, because they're not looking at it as, hey, I'm about to be sold something, right? And I don't approach it that way at all. Like, I don't ever intend on getting on even the listing delivery, which is the start of the sales conversation. I don't intend on closing a sale on that call. Sometimes it happens, but I don't intend on closing the call there, because I'm very non-confrontational about it. And I give them that right up front at the start of the call. Like, hey, look, we're going to cover these things. Does it make sense? And then when they say yes, I say, by the way, just so you know, I'm not going to do any hard closing tactics. At the end of this call, I'm going to introduce you to some offers, some low cost offers that'll help you to start to resolve the issues that I'm about to present to you. But if you're not ready, and most contractors aren't ready at this time, that's fine. I'm just going to ask your permission to send you a few emails about what we discuss on this call today. And in those emails, there will be a link to the offer if you want to check out, or a link to schedule another call with me if you have any additional questions. Is that fair? Does that sound reasonable? Nod your head. And they say, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Whatever. And so I go through that whole process, and then boom, after the call, if they're ready, I'll send them a checkout link for whatever it is we discussed. If they're not ready, then I tell them, hey, I'm going to send you some emails about what we discussed on today's call over the next few days. You can always reach back out to me if you have any additional questions. All of that will be in the email. And I appreciate your time today. The door is always open whenever you're ready. And then we end the call, and then I plug them into a nurture sequence, and then boom, again, the automations help to kind of further warm up that contact. So the DHA process is very, very it consistently works and has now for me for over 4 years. And the phase two, which I just described, some of this phase two is really the sales part of it and the fulfillment part of it, where I'm very close to being able to launch that now too for all the phase one graduate members. So we're relaunching phase one. That's what Adam was bringing up. But during the next phase one group, which is a 12-week program, is at some point during that time, I'm going to launch phase two. And so any graduates from phase one will be invited. They can choose to join or not, but you have to go through phase one first before you can go to phase two. So that's what's coming, guys. Phase one is really building, identifying the niche, developing a brand, building the directory, setting up the email prospecting, marketing, and lead generation system. Okay, that's what the whole process is for. So that wasn't a 1 to 2 minute, Adam, but it was very thorough.
It was. You know what? We'll roll with that. No, I appreciate you taking the time to explain it to people. There's a lot there, but I know that like I said, we get people watching all the time that are new, and got to stop and take the time to let them know. So we're good on that. Last thing I wanted to remind people about is over the last couple months, we've rolled out the Local Mastery newsletter. It's a weekly newsletter we take. It's 5 to 7 actionable SEO insights based on real business, Bradley's testing, whatever else is going on. There's action items for each of these. There's a deep dive. And it's all presented, like I said, in a newsletter where you can go through this stuff less than 30 minutes and put this stuff to work each and every week. So highly suggest checking that out. That's at localmastery.semanticmastery.com. Other than that, I think we're good. So if we want to jump into questions, let's do it.
Okay. We don't have a lot of questions today. We got a handful, but that's okay. That should be good. Let me grab the screen and we'll get right into it. If we get done early, which never happens, get done early. Helping SEO out, guys. Go check this out. I mentioned this. I'm going to mention this every Hump Day Hangout at the start of the call for at least a few more weeks. One of our mastermind members, Dave Kralogic, forgive me, Dave. His name's Dave. He created this service called Helping SEO Out, which is very much like it was kind of modeled after Help a Reporter Out, or HARO, if you guys are familiar with that. But this is, so he calls it HASO, right? Helping SEO Out. But this is basically for local link exchanges. So if you're managing local SEO clients, local business clients, et cetera, where you're managing their websites, doing SEO, link building, things like that for them, this is an opportunity for you to go in and post link opportunities, basically stating that you are willing to place a link on one of your client sites to somebody that requests it in exchange for a link on one of their local business client sites. And so this is really good for, you can tell, like when you post a link opportunity, you can state like, I'm willing to link to these topical categories or these niches or industries, right? You can also specify the geography or the locations in which you're willing to link to and which you're willing to accept links from, right? So you can state what topical categories or business industries and verticals, whatever, that you will link to and that you are willing to receive a link from. And in the same for the geography or the locations, okay? And then it posts. Once you create the link opportunity, then it sends an email to all the other members in this platform. Guys, this is free. It doesn't cost anything right now. And part of the reason he's given it to us made it free right now is because he's trying to build up a user base and an inventory of link opportunities, right? Once he has that to a certain level, then it will become a paid subscription service. But in any case, so that's why I'm sharing this with everybody, because I'm trying to help Dave build up his inventory. But I think it's a great service because Then if you got, these are for real local business sites, guys. These are not for like lead gen properties and things like that. These are for real local business sites. So if you're managing real local clients within their websites, et cetera, you can post link opportunities and then you can do exchanges with others that are doing the same thing. And it's a very powerful and valuable way to generate real links from real sites and with topical relevance matching or geography matching or both, right? Here's an example. A tree service contractor and landscapers, like tree services and landscaping are very similar, but they don't, usually landscapers don't do a lot of tree service work. They'll do like basic tree trimming and pruning and tree planting, things like that, but they don't do like big tree removals and stump grinding most of the time. Some do, but most of them do not. Vice versa, tree service contractors typically don't do heavy landscaping work. They might do light landscaping work, mulching around trees and things like that, but nothing usually typically heavy. So let's say that you have a landscaping company and then you find a link opportunity inside the dashboard for a tree service company in the same city. Then if you posted a landscape opportunity, like that you have an opportunity for a for somebody to post and you would be willing to link to tree services, any kind of home service contractors, things like that or whatever, and then you can also specify the geography. Well, then you might match up with that other SEO that had a tree service contractor in that same city. And then if you do a link exchange between those two, right, then that would be a link that would be both topically relevant and geographically relevant. So that's a very powerful link. Otherwise, or typically, what you'll get one or the other. You'll either get a link from another local business in the same general physical area with that would be, but it might not be topically relevant, but that would be a link with geographic relevance. So it's still good for influencing Maps ranking performance or Google business profile performance. It does have a slight influence on organic performance too. Or you could get a link from, let's say, again, a landscaper receiving a link from a roofing contractor, which would be under kind of the business construction and maintenance topical category. And that could be from another city. So at least you're getting now, in that case, you would be getting a link with topical relevance, but maybe no geographic relevance. And so usually you're probably going to get one or the other, either topical relevance or geographic relevance. And in some cases, when you get lucky, you'll be able to find a link opportunity or secure a link opportunity that has both topical and geographic relevance. So go check it out, guys. Helping SEO out. Sign up for free and go figure it out. Go play around with it. You should get some pretty good results. Okay, we're going to jump into questions then, guys. We don't have a whole lot here. We'll go through what we can, and if we have any time left over, we'll either wrap up or we can chat in the group if anybody has any stuff they want to chat about. All right, so we're going to start with ULF. Ulf, not sure how to pronounce that. Can AI replace SEO? At some point, probably, yeah. I don't think it will yet. It can do a lot of stuff that SEOs do, but there still, in my opinion, requires kind of a strategy element that I think right now is still very much done, I think, or should be done by humans. As you guys know, if you use a lot of AI chat and stuff like that, you use a lot of hallucinations and fabrications and things like that. And so I wouldn't trust it to fully automate it 100%. I would still want some sort of manual component. And right now, I think that that's where kind of the crossroads is, the intersection is between AI and humans is for SEO is really because so much can be automated now with AI that I still think it needs kind of management and control by a human to make sure that it doesn't go off the rails, basically. Okay. And say things that aren't true or make promises that it can't keep, write checks that its ass can't cash, that kind of stuff. All of that is, I think, important to have human moderation and kind of control over everything. So I don't know that eventually, maybe, but I still think that really to be effective, you should have some sort of human element in there that is managing it, making sure everything is running properly, is accurate, true, and then again, mixing strategy in with that as well. Do I think it can replace it entirely? Possibly, but not anytime in the very near future, anyways, in my opinion. Okay. Not with any kind of measurable value. As far as just straight technical SEO stuff, probably. But remember, SEO to be effective, you have to understand marketing, right? Marketing, copywriting, a little bit of everything in marketing, sales, copywriting, marketing, sales, all of that in order to be effective at it, right? Learning how to rank stuff is one thing, but having whatever you rank then convert a visitor into whatever conversion goal that you want them to take, that's a whole different ballgame. So it's a kind of, in my opinion, and I've said this recently on multiple webinars actually. I think where we need to evolve as local marketers, formerly local SEO professionals, but now I consider SEO is so broad now that it's really we are local marketing professionals where SEO is just one component of it. I truly believe that in order for us to stay relevant, we need to kind of get back to the traditional or the foundational like marketing principles of really understanding your buyer persona or different buyer personas, because usually there's going to be different types of buyer personas that would be interested in a company's products or services. So if you have a separate set of buyer or a different, you have the appropriate like buyer personas for whatever is kind of most typical or common in your industries, and then develop marketing specifically to speak to that audience segment. Um, and also remember, there's not only different buyer personas, right, which are, the way that you communicate to them or pitch to them, et cetera, will be slightly different or may have some nuanced differences between how you communicate depending on which type of buyer persona it is. But then there's also different stages of the buying cycle, right? We typically think of things like, you know, the top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel, or where somebody's looking for information at first, but they're not really sure that they have a problem that can be resolved. And middle of funnel is where now they know they have a problem. They know they're aware of some solutions that are out there, but they're not sure of which. Bottom of funnel would be kind of like now they know they got a problem. They know which solution they want. Now they're just looking for the best provider. But then there's also other kind of stages in the buying cycle afterwards. What happened post sale? What about customer retention? What about loyalty, right? Customer loyalty, like getting them to come back and buy more stuff, right? To be an advocate, to go out and then preach and basically promote your products or services or your clients' products or services to their friends and family, their contacts, anybody in their sphere of influence, et cetera. So there's all these different stages in the buying cycle too, pre-sale and post-sale. And so there's marketing language and copy messaging can be modified or customized for individual buyer personas, but then also for each stage in the buying cycle. There's something we're going to be doing a webinar in the next couple of weeks. Yeah, I think it's in the next 2 weeks or 2 or 3 weeks. Adam can pop in if he knows the date, but we're going to be doing a webinar with this for this tool called what's a tool that one of our former colleagues and well, he's still a colleague, but kind of a former JV partner of Semantic Mastery, Rob and his partner now are launching. I don't want to give the name of the tool out yet, but we're going to be doing a webinar about that tool, which is I think is phenomenal. It queries 63 large language models. You can start with just a very broad topic keyword or an entity or a topic, and you plug it into this tool, and it's a tool that does not just keyword. There's going to be multiple subscription levels. The basic subscription level is really a keyword tool or an entity analysis tool, so to speak, as far as what are it's all based upon database, relational database, and how semantically close a supporting terms are to the seed term. So like, in other words, how close are they with distance graph to, like, if they're immediately adjacent terms, there's tier 1 terms and tier 2 terms. So in other words, you plug a seed term in and it will go out and query 63 language models, the 63 language models that are used the most often by most of the marketing platforms or platforms that we use, social media, Google, things, all of that, right? And so it then it submits that query or that term to the 63 models, and then it asks them to return what it understands like tier 1 and tier 2 semantically related, or as far as like the distance graph. The first tier terms are the terms that are immediately adjacent to the seed term. Tier 2 terms are those terms that are immediately adjacent to the tier 1 terms, but are 2 hops away from the seed term. And what that does is it queries all 63 language models, and then it shows you the frequency with which the related terms, tier 1 and tier 2, or the related terms period, in this case, it's called the matrix, I believe, it will show how many of the 63 language models that related term appeared within. So in other words, and I'm not going to show you guys yet because it'd be premature to show you guys, but it's a very, very powerful tool that starts with keyword research, basically. And then from there, there's another analysis tool or whatever that then kind of breaks it down, and this shows you like kind of content structure. If you were going to be developing content using those terms, that shows are especially when you're talking about the tier 1 and tier 2 terms, like the terms that are most closely related to that seed term and that were repeated or referenced by the 63 language models the most. So like any of them that have, let's say out of 63 language models, there's a particular term that is related to the seed query that was shown in 55 of 63 language models. Well, now you know that is a highly related term. So that's something that you should use within your content and blah, blah, blah. But then you can go in and look at the analysis, which is the next kind of function, or one of the functions, I should say. And it will break down those tier 1 terms with the tier 2 terms and kind of show a hierarchy based upon the parameters that you set, as to like, okay, if you're going to optimize a piece of content for this tier 1 term, here are the tier 2 related terms that you should have within headings or subheadings of that page, if that makes sense. So all of that is very similar to keyword stuff, but it's done, the methodology for how it's done is different. Okay. And I think it's very powerful. But to get back to the original question, which was about kind of more about marketing and everything, that's the other options of that, or the other functionality of that tool, goes very deep into developing buyer personas, and then finding different buyer personas. In an example, I was doing a demo of this tool in the mastermind. Mastermind has its benefits, guys, and I, will demo stuff in the mastermind weeks before we'll do an actual public webinar about it. And so I was demoing this in the mastermind a couple of weeks ago, and I was showing, for example, I just put in tree care or tree service or whatever. And then I was just showing that, like, for example, where it shows, like, I think it's called Pathways is the name of the tool, but Pathways shows like different market segments or buyer segments for that industry, right? And so in my case, I put tree care or tree service, whatever it was. And in there, it showed some very interesting things. And I talked, one of the newsletters that we're going to be publishing in the next week or two is going to be talking about this specifically. But it showed in there, like, for example, homeowners associations. So like in property managers, right? So for tree services, imagine, creating a targeted marketing campaign to reach out to and contact homeowners associations and property management companies, right? Think about that. Property management companies that deal in either big residential developments and manage the grounds and all that stuff, right? And the properties do, rentals and maintenance and all that kind of stuff, or big shopping centers and commercial areas and things like that. They all have groundskeeping work that needs to be done, trees that need to be trimmed, things like that. So homeowners associations for neighborhoods, residential developments, things like that. Again, typically they are going to have like their recommended providers list for homeowners in their communities. Will contact the HOA office and ask, like, hey, who do you recommend for pool cleaning or tree trimming or, fence building or stuff like that. And so contacting and doing a direct, a direct response marketing campaign. This is what I was getting at with this comment, guys, which is getting back to traditional and direct response marketing tactics and principles. And we can use AI now to help us very quickly build out these different buyer persona segments for a particular industry, then develop all the content for a specific buyer persona, but then for each different stage within the sales cycle. Do you get it? And so now we're getting very, very targeted with our messaging that will, if done right, will convert much higher than just generic content that is ranked in search, right? In Google search, we're typically, to get back, remember, can AI replace SEO? That was the original question. In search, we've always, we've typically really done whatever we could to rank a page. And conversion rate optimization, right, or conversion optimization or whatever, is typically something that we do as kind of a secondary thing, unless we're driving paid traffic to. And then conversion rate optimization is something you prioritize. But in SEO, a lot of the times, at least in my experience in local SEO, is that most local SEOs are just trying to get shit ranked. It's, conversion rate optimization can be damned initially. It's about getting it ranked first. And then once it's ranked, then they start working on trying to optimize for conversions, et cetera. But this takes that away, because instead of trying to just, it makes it better, because then you can do direct response marketing, meaning cold email, social media outreach, direct mail, physical mail. Guys, this takes the digital component away from it. It doesn't mean that you can't still also optimize for all those too. But I'm saying with tools like what we're going to be demoing and sharing with you guys in a webinar in a couple of weeks, this tool makes it so much easier to very quickly develop these buyer personas and content for each of the different, stages within the buying cycle for each buyer persona, so that then you can start creating, again, cold email campaigns, social media outreach campaigns, advertising campaigns for like, YouTube ads and things like that. Direct mail, like I said, physical mail is still valuable. In fact, I think it actually converts better now than a lot of digital marketing stuff does, because it's not used as nearly as much. So it's not a saturated market anymore. And so we can use AI then to overcome SEO or replace the need for SEO, if that makes sense. I'm not saying you shouldn't also do SEO, but what I'm saying is I think as Google loses market share, and it's not to just one other competitor. Like, in other words, there's not one singular large language model or chat, AI chat or anything that is taking the bulk of the market share, right? I mean, I guess Perplexity is one of the ones that is taking more away from search, I guess, for local than anything else. But there are so many options available now that Google is losing market share, but it's being distributed. That market share that it's losing is being lost across multiple other platforms instead of like just one other. So, what I think we should be doing in order to stay relevant is learning how to get back to foundational elements of what is direct response marketing principles, which is, again, speaking directly to a particular buyer with specific messaging, that elicits a direct response. That's hence the name direct response marketing. And so I think AI can help us to do all of that now in a much faster way, because we now have access to all the data that AI has access to, right? And so instead of trial and erroring, like in direct response marketing, you might have, previous to AI, you would have, databases or, books and things like that from that would kind of say like, hey, we've done testing in this industry, and these are the types of creatives that tend to perform or convert best, and these are the types of messaging and all that. But now we have large language models where like all the data on the web is at our fingertips, and we can query with prompts or tools like what we're going to be demoing that does all the querying and all the prompting automatically. All you do is put a keyword in or a topic in and hit go, and then work that keyword or that topic through that tool, and it automatically creates all of this resources for you. And now you can create all these targeted marketing campaigns that aren't necessarily digital marketing reliant. Like, in other words, again, there's a number of ways you can use that data to then target a specific segment within an audience. So I gave you guys one that was kind of very similar: HOAs and property management groups. Another one that came out that was introduced to me that I had seen before, but I never really took the time to think through it. And I've seen these in Search Console, was for some of my tree service contractor clients that are in an area that have golf courses. Oftentimes in Search Console, I will see like tree maintenance, uh, tree tree care for golf courses, tree maintenance for golf courses, or golf course tree maintenance, things like that. So you see like in Search Console where that is a query that around golf courses, like golf course property maintenance managers and things like that, right? You think about like the cost, again, it's just another example of how this tool introduced to me like a whole nother subsegment of that we could be reaching out to for tree contractors that are in areas that have golf courses. Remember, golf courses and country clubs spend a shit ton of money on making sure that their properties are kept nice and look beautiful, right? And so because of that, again, that would be a great opportunity to do a targeted outreach for a tree contractor to golf courses and property maintenance managers for golf courses, et cetera. And other, parks and things like that, right? So I'm just giving you guys some examples of, can AI replace SEO? I don't think entirely, but I think it can replace a lot of the stuff that we've done in SEO to then allow us to focus on higher level like strategy and things like that, right? And I think that's where we're like, in my opinion, I think that's really what we should be kind of moving towards is really learning how to use AI to market more effectively to the customers of the industries that we provide marketing services to, right? And because we're spreading out now across so many different channels, marketing channels, it's no longer just Google, right? Or in my industry, I almost focused entirely on Google because social media wasn't a good way to generate tree service leads. At least in my experience, it wasn't. But now, again, because people are across different large language models and all these different social media platforms and not even using search as much, we want to try to we want to try to get our companies referenced and mentioned across all those different platforms, which means, and we talked about this in previous weeks on Hump Day Hangouts, publishing a shit ton of branded content that's always tying the company, the products or services, and the locations that the products or services that the company provides and the locations in which it provides them. Publishing enough content across multiple platforms because different language models ingest content from different platforms, and you never know where the consumer is, which platforms the consumer is using. So it's best to try to establish a presence across as many as possible. How do you do that? Publish more content, not directly from the money site, because then that can create competing pages and on-page optimization, like again, redundancy, competing pages, and all of that, which can lower the performance of the actual website. But publishing content on branded, branded external blogs, external branded blogs like Google Sites, Blogger, Weebly, Tumblr, Strikingly, any of those, it doesn't matter. Medium, anything at all, creating a bunch of branded blogs that are connected to the property, the campaign, the client, the business, but then publishing content across all of those. And now if you've got different buyer personas and you've got content that's developed to speak directly to them, now you've got all these opportunities to publish a ton of content across multiple platforms so that you can speak directly to a particular buyer when they're looking for the products or services that company provides. And it's more likely that the chat apps, the AI chats, are going to, uh, uh, you know, mention or provide the company if somebody was to query it. Like in a golf course area, like who's the best tree service contractor for tree care contractor for golf courses? Well, if there's even in an area where there's golf courses, there might be 25, 30 tree service contractors. But if none of those tree service contractors have any content, published specifically, intentionally published a bunch of content out there about golf course tree maintenance, then, and there's only one, your client, where you've published that content, then the chats are going to automatically bring that up. You see what I'm saying? So my point is, I think it's best to learn how to kind of identify market segments, develop content specifically for them, and then now you've got all these platforms that you can publish content to that will not compete with the main website. In fact, it actually kind of helps to improve it because you're publishing supporting content on these external branded blogs that typically don't have a lot of authority. But by publishing content to them, it helps to build the topical authority, which would make links from them back to the main website and maybe Google Map embeds and things like that more valuable because now those platforms, the blogs, external blogs, are more thoroughly optimized with relevant content. And it also creates the opportunity or presents the opportunity for more potential for the large language models to then serve the client's name, company name up when somebody is querying about the products or services in a particular area when that company has been publishing content about it. And especially with different content published for different types of buyer personas in different stages of the sales cycle, then there's enough of it out there that it can be very, like the results or the answers that the AI give can be very, very targeted and specific to what the searcher, the AI chat user was searching for. Do you understand? So that's kind of my take on how we should be evolving with today's AI and trying to move away from strictly SEO. I was watching a video on YouTube a couple of days ago, and the guy said, I can't remember the name of him, but he said SEO, we know it as search engine optimization, but SEO is should be really kind of that acronym should now be search everywhere optimization. I can't remember the guy who said that, but it was on YouTube and I thought it was a pretty interesting statement. So instead of search engine optimization, SEO should be search everywhere optimization. And I tend to agree now. Okay. Anyways, and I spent a lot of time on that question because I think it's a great question. It's very, very broad, but I've been doing a lot of thinking about this lately. And I think getting away from just the tactics of trying to rank stuff in Google, like that is dying quickly, very quickly. So we have to evolve or else we're going to be left in the dust, right? Great question, though, Ulf. Moving on. Alex says, hey, Bradley, do you have any news on how the RankBridge agent thing is going? ARB agent thing, that's RankBridge. I got Entity Ranker AI, but I haven't had much time to mess with it. Thoughts? Yeah, I'm in the same boat as you, Alex. I haven't had much time to I mean, I've spent at least 12 hours in setting that up and building out the SOPs as I'm doing it because it is very tedious. Um, I have not finished the full setup process even yet. And it's been 2 months, I think, since I purchased the software. So I just haven't had the bandwidth and I just moved and that screwed me up. So until I get more caught up, I'm not going to really be able to. But I've been thinking that's again back to the first question, Alex, just to be clear. I just spent all that time talking about that because I've been thinking a lot about this for the last few weeks as far as what we should be doing. That is one particular way to do exactly what I just talked about. The rank RB agent, which is RankBridge, Peter Drew's product, it's a tool that automates partially the mass production and publishing of content across multiple platforms. So everything that I just described in the previous answer, the answer to the previous question, I mean, was a lot of that was influenced by what I have learned through what Peter Drew has been teaching as part of the RankBridge stuff. So I want to give full credit to Peter for that. I think his particular tool, from my experience, not even getting through the full setup and execution of a run one full time yet, because it is very tedious. There's a ton of setup. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. I just know that I think that there may be some other ways to do it also, um, that might be a little bit easier to set up. Now, I don't know that because I haven't gotten through it. I've got some testing going on. Guys, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, I think it was. But Syndication Academy, which is now called Brand Expander because we got rid of the syndication component, I believe that could be revived. Not as it was from several years ago, because if you guys, some of you will know what I'm talking about, but Syndication Academy was really about using ifttt.com. So if this, then that.com, ifttt.com, but to create these, what they call applets, which were basically where you would take content from a particular source, usually the money site blog or a YouTube channel, and you would or both, and you would connect them to other platforms, branded blogs, social media, bookmarking sites, document sharing sites, things like that. So you could then republish a post. So I would always use in Syndication Academy, we taught to use an RSS trigger from the main websites, the blog, or a YouTube connection. Either way, whenever you publish content, it would then republish that content across all the different other accounts that you had connected. And there would be an attribution link, so a link citing the original source, just like in press releases, right? In press releases, there's the original, and then there's all the copies. The copies all have an attribution link that point to the original. So whoever the original publication is, then all the others have a link that points to it, right? Because it's saying that this is republished from this original source. And so that's what we would do with IFTTT, with the Syndication Academy training. But over time, that republishing of the same content, so it was copies. People say, well, isn't that duplicate content? No, it's duplicate content on the same domain. But when it's the same content republished on different domains, it's the original and in copies. It's not duplicate content. Okay. And so we would do that, but it took it over time, that kind of the effectiveness waned. It was very, very powerful for several years. And then over time, that kind of the effectiveness of that declined a bit. And so we eliminated the syndication part of it, but the valuable part for a few years there was still building additional branded assets, optimizing them properly, interlinking them with other assets, all of that. And so we continued the Brand Expander training. We rebranded it as Brand Expander training instead of Syndication Academy training, because part of the Syndication Academy training was going out and finding all the different platforms that you could create a profile on that then could be connected to auto post to, if that makes sense. So the Brand Expander training eliminated the syndication component, but kept the building of additional profiles because that helps to build authority, branded location authority when you're talking about a local business. Okay. However, I think now because of AI, we have the ability, and I started testing with this a couple of weeks ago before I started my move. Then I started my move and I haven't touched it since. But I set up an N8N, to start developing an app that will take and one of our, everybody knows Brian Caddo, I'm sure. Brian came on with Adam and I on a call about 2 weeks ago. We have a little AI mini mastermind where we talk about this stuff. And Brian was showing me some stuff that he's done. And that just floored me. I was just like, oh my God, that Syndication Academy with the AI component, we should absolutely revive this. And so I thought about it, started to set it up. I haven't messed with it since. But N8N, where you can take a trigger, an RSS feed, whatever, and it does, by the way, it doesn't have to be from the money site. So you could use like Blogger or, WordPress.com or whatever you want, as Medium even, as the primary blog, and then you would use that as the trigger point. So you would publish content at the original trigger, then the RSS feed or however you decide for it to find that new post from the source, however you set the trigger up. Once it has new content, then instead of it just republishing that content, that same exact content, it can feed into a ChatGPT or whatever, Claude or whatever it is that you integrate as the AI agent. So to then analyze the content, you can set prompts in there with specific guidelines. You can even pre-feed the chat, right, with content that about the products and services of the company, frequently asked questions. So basically, like a knowledge base, you can feed all of that into the chat, and then that chat now becomes the receiver of that first piece of content. And then that chat with the prompts that you set can then rewrite that content. You could say rewrite the content, keeping the topic intact, but picking a subtopic to then rewrite a new article about a subtopic that supports the original article, and then republish the first version of it on, let's say, Blogger, and then going to create a second version of that with a different subtopic relevant to the top level topic that was originally published in the original article. And you're going to now write a whole new article about the subtopic to support the primary topic that is now going to be published on WordPress.com, right? And you can add all these different targeted platforms, different social media, branded web or branded blogs, etc., that can all be attached now to this. And every time instead of it being the same piece of content just republished or the same piece of content rewritten, now it's one piece of content that's kind of a top level topic term or whatever. And then all the supporting content now that is specific and unique to a subtopic within that main topic that is now published, linking back to the original post. And it could all, by the way, it can also link back directly to the main website. The point that I'm trying to make now is that you now have the ability, because of AI, to take, with all these advanced prompts and the prompt chaining or the agent chaining, right, that you could put together in N8N to make it to where you have every single piece of content from one original piece of content is now written with specific parameters to keep, you can have specific structure recommendations within the prompts and everything about how you want the articles written, the number of H1s or excuse me, H2s, subheadings, etc. All that kind of stuff can be put in there, and it can then be automated through these AI agents. And I just use N8N for that because I had set that up as I'm building that out. But you could do it with any of them, make any of those whatsoever out there. Okay, does that make sense? And I think that's where the biggest, like, I think there's an opportunity there to build an app that will do that, to where all you have to do is really focus in on generating content from one source. And then it's going to automatically cascade through all these different platforms and blogs, et cetera, that you've set up, but it will all be unique and original content, right? Instead of always being republished content. So I think that's where really the big thing is going to go, like as far as like how, and that's why I said, getting back to the original, the first question that we saw here about, this is my kind of what I've been thinking a lot about for the last few weeks about how I should be moving my business and forward and evolving to get away from just SEO and more to traditional marketing, and still in the digital environment. And so using the example that I just described about using N8N or something like that, you could very quickly develop those buyer personas and then the different the cycles within the stages within the sales cycle, and develop content. Remember, you only have to really come up with the concepts one time for each buyer persona, and then one time for each stage within the buying cycle that you want to target, because you might not want to target all of them. And then you come up with that one time and you just create. And by the way, this is why I keep telling everybody, go into one industry, guys, because if you're in one industry, you can develop all this stuff out, and then you can start running with it and refine it, right? Improve it as you go based upon conversion tracking and all that kind of stuff. You can determine what is most effective and constantly refine it. If you try to do this across multiple industries, you're going to be stuck in the setup process most of the time. And so that's why I've not done a whole lot with the RankBridge stuff, is because I haven't had the time. It is very, very time consuming. And I get it. I understand the whole point. It's all that setup, but there's got to be ways that we can make it more efficient, right? And so that's kind of what I've been thinking about a lot the last couple of weeks. But unfortunately, I haven't had a lot of time to play with either RankBridge or the N8N, finish setting that up because I just haven't had the time. I'm hoping in another week to 10 days, I'll be caught up. And then I want to get back onto that again. So ask me again in a couple of weeks, Alex. I think there's a real opportunity, though, for using AI to kind of help us develop that stuff out in a very efficient way and then produce all the content and just create a much bigger footprint for the client, so to speak. All right. Who's Ivan said, I remember you talked about testing a contact form submission tool for lead gen. Do you have any updates on that? Yeah, I did. I do. I posted it in the group the other day. I can't so I was going to go try to find it, but I don't have enough time to find it right now. Anyways, I tested this contact form submission service. They require you to do 10,000 contacts minimum, and it's 4,000, or excuse me, $4, or excuse me, 4 cents per contact form submission. And you have to do 10, like they require a minimum of 10,000 commitments. So that's $400. And then there's a service fee for generating the list. So I think it's like $430. And I tried it and I should have never done it. At least I shouldn't have done it the way that I did it. Okay. So I went ahead and said, you know what? I want to try this. So, and I did. I got one client out of it. No kidding. I landed a client out of it. So it was, you know, the client has to stay subscribed for 4 months in order for it to cover the costs because the only client I got out of it was a $99 a month review client, it's a tree service contractor in Pennsylvania. And we're setting up reviews service for them through High Level. So that's a $99 a month subscription service. And so they got to stay subscribed for 4 months for me to recover the cost, if that makes sense. But I spent $430 and it did, 10,000. But the problem was I could have set up, and I didn't know because I hadn't tested it, and I just pulled the trigger on it and said, screw it, let's just try it, see what happens. And what happened was I put my primary email in that got sent and my mobile phone number that is connected with the High Level account for Tree Care HQ. So that's what I put in there. Was my main email address for Tree Care HQ and my main mobile number for my Tree Care HQ profile, if that makes sense. And what happens is, and I should have known this because I talked about this before, but I used to do voicemail drops with cold prospecting outreach to tree service contractors. And for those of you who don't know what a voicemail drop is, that's where it's a ringless voicemail where it inserts a voicemail into a mobile phone voicemail without the phone ringing or without, you know what I mean? Like, or so, and the way that High Level did it, I don't know if it's still the way that High Level does it, but 4 years ago when I was doing voicemail drops or ringless voicemail, what High Level would do is it would call the phone number. And then while that number was ringing from that one call, it would call a second time, which would, on mobile phones, send it directly to voicemail, the second call. Do you get it? And so it would call the one number and then it would call the number immediately while it was still ringing on the first call. And then it would get to voicemail and then it would insert the MP3 that we would record and add to the campaign or whatever once the voicemail recording picked up or the beep or whatever it was, then it would leave that MP3, insert that MP3. And back then, 4 or 5 years ago, when I was doing voicemail drops and testing for the directory outreach process, the DHA cold outreach process, I was doing cold email and voicemail drops. What was happening with tree service guys back then was they would see a missed call and the voicemail would be on their phone, but they wouldn't even listen to the voicemail. They would just see the missed call and then they would call the number back. And so there was this awkward transition where I was receiving calls throughout the day from tree guys that I had sent a voicemail message to that specifically was telling them, hey, I sent you an email with your company's contact information as we understand it. We're trying to confirm it for your directory listing on the treecarehq.com directory. Go check out your email. And if you take a moment to reply back, let us know if it's accurate or if any changes are needed, blah, blah, blah. They wouldn't hear any of that. They would just call me. And so I would answer the phone and there'd be this awkward, like, hey, you called for an estimate. And then there would be this really strange and awkward kind of transition where I would try to recover that conversation and steer it away from like them thinking that I'm trying to get an estimate for a tree service to, hey, I'm trying to, it was very strange and awkward. And so it just didn't work out. So I turned it off and I just went to straight cold email. Well, when I started this campaign with this contact form submission service, I put my phone number in and my email in. And so what happens is this company went out and hit 10,000 contact forms from tree service companies across the United States over the course of like 3 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, or whatever it was. And I would get hammered with calls. I mean, for the last couple of weeks, guys, I'd get dozens and dozens of calls from tree service contractors per day on my phone. And so I just let them go to voicemail. I'm not fucking answering the phone. And I also got a shit ton of SMSs. I also got a whole lot of emails because a lot of those contact forms are through like Jobber and stuff like that now that have automations. And so when the contact form is submitted, it sends an SMS confirming acknowledgement of the contact form submission. So I just got over the last several weeks, I've been hammered with SMSs, emails, and voicemails from tree service contractors that thought I was asking for an estimate request when really I was pitching them on a review service. I did end up getting one client out of it. And by the way, it is kind of interesting, and just to be very clear, because we're going to run out of time in a minute anyway, as I was worried we weren't going to have enough time or we're going to have enough questions. Um, what's interesting is, so I do have all of these contacts came in through High Level, right? Because I used my High Level, my email address, which is integrated with High Level, the SMTP. So every email that was received created a contact record in High Level. Every SMS or voice call received created a contact record in High Level. So even though it was very annoying and disturbing throughout the day to have all those SMSs and emails and voice calls coming in and all that kind of stuff, and I just ignored most of them, I now have thousands, literally thousands of new tree contractors in my database in TreeCare HQ High Level account, if you get what I'm saying. So I can go in and now I've got a whole new set of contacts that I know I have direct communication with because they replied to my contact form submission, right? So in all reality, even though I've only sold one client because I was the only one that I actually ended up communicating with, I have literally hundreds, if not over 1,000 or more contacts that are now in the database that I know I have valid communication with. Does that make sense? So how would I have done it differently? Well, now that I know how it works, what I would do is set up, and I'm willing to try it again, but I got to do some setup first. And that is in High Level, I can set it up to where I issue a new phone number so that all the replies coming in on that phone number are isolated to this one campaign, right? So I could add a new phone number to High Level that would be dedicated to this contact form submission campaign. And then I would create an automation that would have, basically any reply from this particular campaign. It would, then send an automated reply back, right? So, for example, if I got an inbound text message or an inbound voicemail from one of these contractors that we submitted the contact form submission service, that we contacted them through their contact form submission, and they reply back, it would send an automated message to them that would then clarify or kind of add more detail as to what the contact request was about, if that makes sense. So I can automate the replies to the initial responses that came back from the contact form submission. Now that I know how it works, I could do that. It would take me, a few hours to set it up, but I could set up a landing page. I could set up voicemails so that like in MP3s so that I could send voicemail drops. So in other words, if a call came in and or an SMS or something, then I could have an automation to do a voicemail drop to that number. So in other words, a call comes in and we'll put a wait step in for 2 minutes or whatever it is, and then it would say, okay, now send a ringless voicemail back to that number that call came in on. And so it would then send a message, a voicemail message that would say, hey, you replied back to our contact form submission, but I'm not actually looking for tree services. What I was trying to do is whatever. Look, here's the thing. If I set all that up to where I can basically provide more detail about what it is that I'm pitching in an automated way, then across 10,000 contacts, what do I care? I don't care if I piss some people off. I got one out of with no kind of follow up, no automation or nothing built into this first test campaign. I did get one client out of it. I spent $400 to secure that client, but I got one client. Now that I know how it works, if I take the time to go through and set it up to where I have automated replies and responses, etc., then I could do it again the next time, and I likely will get significantly higher number of closes out of it, right? So anyway, I'll give you guys more detail on that when I have time to kind of post-mortem look at all that stuff, right? How do you create an entity assets on the company.site domain? I believe that was I can't remember. I'll have to look it up. Who's IFA? It's not company.site isn't the platform. That's when you publish a site. It's an e-com platform, I believe. And then, but it gives you the ability to publish sites, and it's on company.site domain. I can't remember what it is right now off the top of my head. I'll try to look that up for next week though. What software do you use for appointment booking in DHA, and do you let them choose a time from calendar or give them a set time? I use High Level's calendar. High Level calendar integration, it integrates with my workspace calendar. So I'm using the High Level booking app. And I let clients like tree service contractors or semantic, white label clients, etc., they can book with me. But when I set this up for tree contractors, High Level for tree contractors, customers don't book their appointments for tree contractors. They request an appointment, and then the contractor calls the customer to schedule the appointment when it's convenient for both the customer and the contractor. So the contractor is responsible for scheduling the appointments. And we don't, not one single tree contractor I've ever worked with has said, yeah, let's set up a calendar for a customer to book their own appointments. So just to be clear, in my agencies, yes, the clients can book appointments with me through my calendar app, which is a function of High Level. But for my contractor clients, they book the appointments. They get the appointment requests, which are quote or job requests from clients or customers, contacts, and then they will call them back and schedule the appointment when they can determine it's convenient for both the customer and the contractor. Okay. Can you share what services you provide exactly when you say all on-page factors completed and optimized in the GB SEO offer? Yeah, it's just complete all of the components of the Google Business Profile, Huzaifa. That it complete all the components of or elements of the GBP. Make sure there's photos. All the appropriate categories are added, right? All relevant categories are added. Services are added. Optimized descriptions for the services. Products, if products are available in the GBP, depending on the service category. You want to add products. You want to add photos, optimized photos. That when I say optimized, I just mean preferably photos that were actually taken on job sites for tree contract, in my industry. But then we do QR code and logo overlay on 10 images and upload them. So just basically all on-page factors completed and optimized. It's pretty self-explanatory. That should be Google Business Profiles. Other than there's some tiny differences between different service, when the primary service category or Google Business category is sometimes, depending on what category it is, there are some slight differences in the GBPs, but they're almost all the same. And what is best practice? Complete the profile 100%, right? Add full detail, optimize everything that you can. That's what I mean. Okay. Last question. Alex says, hey, Bradley, quick question. Since GHL doesn't have the ability to do inner folders yet, would it be a drawback or create crawl resistance / over optimization? So crawl resistance or over optimization if we do .com/tree service Denver, Colorado, in lieu of having the inner folder capability. I've seen some people doing. Is that just the case of bad SEO, or emulating the inner folder structure can help? No, I mean, look, I don't like to over optimize the URL. That's all I'm saying. Okay. So if personally, look, the URL structure, I talk about this, guys. I've been teaching about this for fucking 10 years. No kidding. But the difference, it's what you call a virtual silo or physical silo. A virtual silo is you still create silo structure, but the URL doesn't show it, right? The URL is just going to say domain.com/permalink or post slug, page slug, whatever it is. So the hierarchy of the page structure doesn't show in the URL. That's a virtual silo. A physical silo, it shows in the URL. So that would be like in WordPress, if you use the category /post name permalink structure, then you were going to see it all in the URL. I prefer to see it in the URL personally. But I don't like to over optimize the URLs, the slugs, right? The permalinks. And so I don't like these types of permalinks, because usually tree service in my industry would be in the domain or something very similar. And so I'm usually just going to have Denver as the slug, right? Or Denver-CO, right? Because I don't want to over optimize. But can you do that? Yeah, of course you can. But the reason why I don't like to I say over optimize the URLs, and that's not really over optimization, but well, it depends. It depends on what the SEO, or excuse me, the domain is. But because remember, that's the first touch point, guys, not just for Google, but for language models, right? How does all the bots crawl the web? It's through links. So links is always the first touch point, right? It's always the link first, and then they read from right to left, or excuse me, left to right, top to bottom. So the bots do, right? So very much like we read in English, right? So they read left to right, top to bottom. So you got the URL, then you have the SEO title. Then there's the H1. I'm talking about the main optimization elements of the page, right? So there's the URL, SEO title, then the H1, which is another title. The titles are the SEO title or meta title, and the H1, which is the page or post title, right? So URL, titles, then you have headings, H2s, subheadings, H3s, 4s, 5s, etc., internal links and media, or media and internal links, right? Those are your main optimization elements. And so if you're going to be optimizing those other elements of the page, then I like to de-optimize the URL to just be basically the essence of what the page is. So treecare.com, treecare.com slash Denver is what I would put, or Denver-CO, right? But yeah, can you do that? Yes, you can. But just you got to be careful, because remember, when you have a very optimized URL or permalink, then at least according to Google, it doesn't matter the language models, but to Google, it's like the first touch point when it's super optimized. It's like it taints the lens in which Google is going to be looking at the rest of the page through. Do you understand? It's almost like you're flagging it right off the start. Okay, well, this smells fishy. It smells like an SEO's got his hands all over this, right? Because the first touch point's super optimized. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying be careful, because that can oftentimes trigger over optimization if you've super optimized the rest of the page. So just be careful with that. That's all. Can you do that? Yes, of course you can. Okay. If somebody doesn't want to create subdomain sites but wants to use one domain for all location pages, can you do that? Yeah, of course you can. Remember though, there's a little bit of danger with that, because if the site ever gets penalized by something, everything's going to tank. If you have subdomains, if the root domain gets slapped with a penalty, then all subdomains will get hurt. But if the subdomain, any individual subdomain gets slapped with a penalty, it will isolate to that particular subdomain. So that's part of the reason why I like to use subdomains. All right. Okay, you guys were quiet today. There wasn't a lot of comments or anything else, so I'm going to wrap it up. I don't see any other questions or anything. So, and I think my partner's all bounced. So I'm going to jump out of here, guys. Appreciate you guys being here. We'll be here next week as well. So thanks everybody. We'll see you next week.